Rodney Alcala, also known as the dating game killer, also known as John Berger, seen here in a 1978 appearance on the dating game show, which earned him his moniker. United States Army. William Andrews, one of the perpetrators of the so-called Hi-Fi murders of 1974, along with Dale Selby Pierre and Keith Leon Roberts. Ostensibly considered to be a robbery, the perpetrators seemed to be more interested in torturing and murdering the employees of the store by pouring drain cleaner down their throat than actually robbing the place. All three men, United States Air Force. Aaron Alexis, also known as the Washington Navy Yard shooter, killed 12 people and himself in 2013, United States Navy. Joseph Ernest Atkins, serial killer of at least 3 people, United States Army. Matthew Lorne Alder, also known as Matt Pendleton, murder of at least 2 women, most notably Wanda Musk in 1993, United States Marine Corps. James Bergstrom, also known as the Ski Mask Rapist, also known as the Parkwood Rapist, United States Navy. Caesar Baroni, born Adolph James Rhodey, serial killer of at least 4 people, United States Army. Thomas R. Bundy, also known as the North Pole Killer, the military psychotherapist who was treating him, had his wife murdered by a hitman and then attempted to blame the murder on the North Pole Killer, presumably not knowing that the North Pole Killer was actually his patient, Thomas R. Bundy, of the United States Air Force. Mark Douglas Burns, also known as the Clearfield Rapist, serial rapist and confessed serial killer of at least 3 people, United States Marine Corps. George Emil Banks, killed 13 and injured 1 in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania in 1982, United States Army. James Opleton Bradley, serial killer of at least 3 people, including his 8-year-old stepdaughter, Ivy Gibson. He wrote several short stories in prison, one of them entitled The Beast Within, United States Army. William Bonin, also known as the Freeway Killer, serial killer of at least 21 people, almost certainly more. He raped and murdered young men and boys, United States Air Force. Carl Robert Brown, rampage killer of 8 people in a Miami welding shop in 1982, United States Navy. David Berkowitz, also known as Son of Sam, also known as the .44 caliber killer. He famously terrorized New York City in the summer of 1977. United States Army. Wilson Chewist, serial rapist and serial killer of at least 2 people, United States Army. Joseph Gerard Christopher, also known as the Midtown Slasher, also known as the .22 caliber killer, serial killer of at least 12 young men and boys, most of them black, United States Marine Corps. Dean Corll, also known as the Candyman, also known as the Pied Piper. He was the vice president of his family's candy business. He had at least 28 victims, all ages 13 to 20. Prolific pedophile with strange links to John Wayne Gacy, which have recently been brought to light in the documentary The Clown and the Candyman, United States Army. Andre Crawford, also known as the Southside Strangler, serial killer of 11 people, United States Army and United States Navy. John Dwight Canaday, serial killer of at least 3 people, United States Navy. Chris Coleman, family annihilator who murdered his wife and 2 kids. He worked security for televangelist Joyce Meyer, United States Marine Corps. Dwayne Antonio Craddock, also known as Dwayne Hamilton, rampage killer of 13 people, including himself, United States Army National Guard. Carol Edward Cole, serial killer of between 16 to 35 people, United States Army. Doug Clark, also known as the Sunset Strip Killer, also known as the Hollywood Slasher, at least 6 victims, almost certainly more. He had a female accomplice named Carol M. Bundy. Sexual sadist, necrophile, pedophile, and like so many people on this list, he enjoyed photography and videography of his exploits. United States Air Force. Father, United States Naval Intelligence. Harvey Carignan, also known as the Wonad Killer, also known as Harvey the Hammer, serial killer of at least 3 people, probably more, United States Army. Peter C. Contos, spree killer of 3 people, United States Air National Guard. Richard Allen Davis, serial rapist and perpetrator of the hugely publicized 1993 murder of Polly Klaas. United States Army. James Floyd Davis, Vietnam vet who killed 3 people at his workplace in Asheville, North Carolina in 1995. United States Army. Albert DeSalvo, also known as the Boston Strangler, though he may not have been the only one. He was a naval petty officer, and when he was arrested, he was wearing his dress uniform. United States Army and United States Navy. James DeBartoleben Jr., also known as Mike DeBartoleben, also known as the Mall Passer, convicted serial rapist and strongly suspected to be a serial killer. An FBI profiler described DeBartoleben as the best documented sexual sadist since the Marquis de Sade. United States Air Force. Father, United States Army. Christopher Dorner, spree killer of 4 United States Navy Reserves. Paul Duraceau, also known as the Jacksonville Strangler, serial killer of at least 7 people, United States Army. Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, also had some misadventures in Germany, United States Army. Joseph James DeAngelo, also known as the Golden State Killer, also known as the Visalia Ransacker, also known as the East Area Rapist, also known as the East Side Rapist, also known as the East Bay Rapist, also known as the Diamond Knot Killer, also known as the original Night Stalker, active from 1974 to 1986. Ironically, he was a police officer in Exeter, California in the burglary unit while he was committing all of these rapes and murders. United States Navy. Father, United States Army. Richard Ivanitz, also known as the Spotsylvania serial killer of teenage girls, often kidnapping them from their front yards until one of them escaped and identified him. Shortly after that, he committed suicide while being pulled over by the police. United States Navy. Edward Wayne Edwards, serial killer of over 10 people, also known as Hookman, also known as the Man with the Hook. Seen here on a 1972 episode of To Tell the Truth. I highly recommend you watch this episode. United States Marine Corps. You know, we got Rodney Alcala on the dating game. We got Edward Wayne Edwards on the game show To Tell the Truth. You gotta wonder how much more shoddy police work before we may have seen John Wayne Gacy on Let's Make a Deal. You gotta wonder how many more jailbreaks were we away from seeing Ted Bundy in the Showcase Showdown. Ted Bundy, by the way, not a military veteran. However, he was indeed a veteran of the 1968 presidential campaign of Nelson Rockefeller. In fact, he was a Rockefeller delegate to the 1968 Republican National Convention in Miami, Florida. Maybe Mr. Bundy should have stayed the hell out of politics and taken his chances in the Air Force.